please join me in welcoming to the Distinctive Voices podium, Dr. Sandra Lagenstein.
Good evening. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, and thank you for the invitation to speak here. I'm very excited to share my research with you. And thank you for being here in the audience and for people online too. Yes, so today I would like to share my research on the regulation of romantic love. If you came here today hoping you would get a scientific definition of love, I'm going to have to disappoint you. This is often what people ask me when they hear I do research on love. They're like, so what is it? And the fact is that scientists cannot agree. So we cannot agree on a definition, we cannot agree on how many forms of love there are and which ones they are. So it varies with who you ask. Now, in my research, I use a model that has been proposed by Dr. Helen Fisher. This is very appealing to me. I'm not sure that it's the one correct model, but I find it's very helpful in my research. So according to her, in humans, we have three distinct types of love, if you will. And the first one is sexual desire, or you could also call it lust. And this is just something that could be satisfied with a one-night stand, for example. Infatuation is sometimes also called passionate love, which is a different form of love. And this is that early stage love that is accompanied by butterflies in the stomach and being nervous when you're around your beloved. I think most of you will recognize this feeling. And then the third form of love is attachment, which is sometimes also called companionate love. And this is a form of love that develops over time. It's a much more calmer state, so you're not actually nervous when you're with your beloved, but they can calm you down. You just like to hang out with them. And actually, this is not always romantic love. So we are also often attached to our parents, our children, our friends, even pets. So attachment is a lot broader than just romantic love. I like to talk about the symptoms of romantic love. We don't consider romantic love to be a disorder. It's not in the DSM, which is the Handbook of Mental Disorders. I'm not saying we should put it in there, but people that are in love sometimes act a little crazy. So they do show some symptoms that overlap with a lot of mental disorders. There are physical symptoms, especially the sexual desire and infatuation have a lot of physical symptoms, such as a beating heart, fast beating heart, blushing, things like that. And then there are behavioral symptoms, so people who are in love behave differently, so they tend to hang out in places where they may encounter their beloved, especially if they're not yet or not in a relationship with their beloved. They stare into space. And then there are affective symptoms or emotional symptoms. So people can feel very euphoric or very nervous, or like I said, it can be very calming. And then there are also cognitive symptoms. And cognition is the way we think, basically. So attention and memory are two examples of cognitive processes. And people think differently when they are in love. And this is what part of my research is about. So my research is about the interaction between love and cognition. And I have several studies in which I have shown that love improves cognition. So people that are in love have better memory and better attention for information that has to do with their beloved. So that is love improving cognition. I'm also studying how love may impair cognition, which is, for example, that people who are in love tend to be very distracted, right? They have a lot of good memory and good attention for things that have to do with their beloved, but if they need to be doing something else, such as their homework or their work, they usually have trouble focusing on that. And so I have done a few studies, and I'm about to publish or finish up a paper on, does love distract you from other stuff you should be doing? But I also study, does the way we think change how in love we are? And that is what I want to talk to you about today, and that is love regulation. But before I talk about love regulation, specifically, I want to talk to you about why we need to study romantic love. Oftentimes when I tell people that I study romantic love, they say, oh, that is so cool and so interesting. But then when I try to get money to do the work, people are saying, well, do we really need to do this? Is this important? Love is good and nice, right? Why do we need to spend usually tax money on this research? So I want to tell you why I think it's important. First off, almost everyone, not everyone, but almost everyone falls in love at least once in their lifetime, and many people fall in love many more times. So the lifetime prevalence of love is almost 100%. Whereas the lifetime prevalence of any mental disorder, ranging from depression to dementia to borderline personality disorder and all the other disorders, is only 45%. Now, 45% is still a lot, right? It means that almost half of the people get a mental disorder at some point in their life. But it's nowhere near 100%, right? So the research on romantic love affects almost all humans, basically. Okay, but love is good, right? And yes, we know love has a lot of positive effects on individuals and on society. So especially infatuation is associated with a lot of positive emotions, such as euphoria. And we know that romantic relationships increase happiness and life satisfaction. So it's all good, right? Why do we need to study love? Because there are also a lot of negative effects. And I think everyone has experienced these, but tends to forget about them. Infatuation is also accompanied by a lot of negative emotions. Like I said, nervousness, anxiety, jealousy, things like that. Romantic breakups are associated with negative emotions and depression. Dysfunctional relationships are associated with decreased happiness and life satisfaction. So we know people in relationships are typically happier than singles, but only if the relationship is happy, functional, right? So being in a bad relationship is actually worse for you than than not being in a relationship at all. Love also plays a role in several mental disorders, such as sexual dysfunctions, paraphilic disorders, erotomanic and jealous delusional disorder. And people have killed themselves over love. And also, love plays a role in criminal behavior. So you can think about stalking, domestic violence, and people have killed over love. And so love has a lot of positive effects on us, sure, but also a lot of negative effects. And so I hope by doing research on romantic love, my research is very fundamental, so it's very basic research driven by curiosity, but I hope that ultimately we can use the knowledge we gain by doing research on love to increase the positive effects and decrease the negative effects of love. And that is why I think it's worth spending money on this kind of research. Okay, so the specific problem that I want to talk to you about today has to do with love regulation. So, as probably many of you also know, in long-term relationships, love may be weaker than desired. Infatuation and sexual desire are usually very intense early on in a relationship or even right before the start of a relationship, and they decrease rather quickly. Attachment, which is that companionate love, actually takes some time to develop, but then, unfortunately, it also decreases over decades. So very slowly, but it does decrease over time. And we know these things threaten relationships. So one of the main reasons for divorce is that the passion is no longer there. People are not necessarily fighting or no one cheated, but they say we're like brother and sister, the passion is gone. So this is a problem. There are also situations, however, in which love may be stronger than desired, such as in unreciprocated or forbidden love. And I already mentioned them. Romantic breakups decrease happiness and life satisfaction, and they are also a huge risk factor for depression, especially in adolescents. So, how convenient would it be if we could regulate our love feelings? If we could upregulate them, so make them a little more intense when they are weaker than desired, which is, for example, in long-term relationships, or if we could downregulate them, so make them a little less intense when they are stronger than desired, such as when you are in love with someone you're not supposed to be in love with. In my 2016 paper, I called this love regulation. That is based on the term emotion regulation that we have a lot of research on, so we know we can change our emotions, and I thought, well, can we then also change how in love we are? So love regulation is the use of behavioral or cognitive strategies to change the intensity of current feelings of romantic love. So before I started to do, or my first study on this topic, I first wanted to test people's beliefs, so people's preconceptions. What do people think about love regulation? Do people think they can regulate, they can change how in love they are? I found out through this study that there is a small but significant portion of people that think that love is a natural process that should not be controlled. So for example, I asked my participants, what do you do to prevent love feelings from declining in long-term relationships? And then 5 to 15%, depending on the sample, said, I do not try to do this at all. They said, if the love feelings decline, that means the relationship is done and I need to break up and move on. Now, of course, this is fine. If people think that, they are welcome to act accordingly. But then it becomes really difficult to be in a long-term or to have a long-term relationship because we know typically love feelings do decline over time. So if you believe this, then you are not very likely to be in a long-term relationship. I was a little bit surprised by this because we know, like I said, emotion regulation, we know we can change our emotions and that can be very adaptive, can be very healthy to do. So if you are too angry about something, you can make yourself a little less angry. And so I was thinking, if emotion regulation can be adaptive, then why couldn't love regulation be adaptive? There's also a small but significant portion of people that think that love regulation is difficult or maybe even impossible. So for example, I asked my participants, what do you do to decrease love feelings after a romantic breakup? And then instead of giving me some examples, some people said, I'm unable to do this, I can't. I also had participants both in the United States and in Holland, which is where I'm from, complete a questionnaire, and there were a bunch of statements that had to do with how much do you think you can change, how in love you are. And the average score ranged from 1, it could be between 1 and 9. So if people would score a 1 on this questionnaire on average, it means they thought love was completely uncontrollable. If they scored 9, they thought it was completely controllable. And as you can see here, on average in both countries, both Western countries, but still very different countries, the average score of participants was below 5, slightly below 5, so they thought it was, love was somewhat uncontrollable. But we know we can regulate our emotions. I know emotion regulation is possible. There's a lot of research on that topic, so why wouldn't we be able to regulate our love feelings? Then I did some more studies on people's beliefs about love regulation or preconceptions, and it turns out that people think, on average, that attachment and sexual desire are more controllable than infatuation, that the intensity of love feelings is more controllable than who you are in love with, and this one's interesting, people thought, other people can change how in love they are, I can't. Other people can do this better than I can, but that's interesting, right? And then they also thought that love upregulation, so making love feelings more intense, is easier than making them less intense, downregulating. Okay, so that gave me a pretty good idea of what people think about love regulation, but then I wanted to test, well, can people do this? So I had people come into the lab, and I had them try 2 strategies that I thought could work based on the emotion regulation literature. So the first strategy I called positive reappraisal. And that is, I told people, focus on a positive aspect of your beloved, their relationship, or positive future scenario. So participants could, for example, think about, my beloved is so handsome, or so funny, or so smart. And then, or, we have such a good relationship, we hardly fight, we are interested in the same things. Or they could think, we'll get married and live happily ever after. I also asked them to do negative reappraisal, so that's focusing on the negative aspects of the beloved, the relationship, or negative future scenario. So you could think about, my beloved is so lazy, they never do the dishes, the relationship, we fight a lot, there's a lot of stuff we don't agree on, or negative future scenarios, which may be, yes, we may get married, but like so many people, we'll probably get a divorce later. And then I had them do this task, so I told them, either view the pictures, which was a control condition, so they weren't doing any regulation in this condition. In the increase condition, I asked them to do positive reappraisal, And in a decreased condition, I asked them to do negative reappraisal. Then I showed them a picture of their beloved while they thought of those positive or negative things. And then I asked them, how infatuated do you feel right now? How attached, and how good or bad do you feel right now? Does that task make sense? Okay. And here are the results. So I had two groups. I had a group who was in a relationship, and I had a group who had recently broken up or had been broken up with, but the results were fairly similar between the groups. So the first result was that the positive reappraisal, so thinking about the positive aspects of the beloved, the relationship, or the future, increased attachment ratings. So after people thought about these positive things, they said they felt a little bit more attached to their beloved than after just doing the view condition, where they just looked at the pictures and didn't think anything in particular. Negative reappraisal of the beloved, so thinking all those negative things, decreased infatuation and attachment. And as you may be able to see, so these red bars is the view condition, that's sort of the baseline, and then these lighter bars are upregulate, thinking positive things, and these even lighter bars are downregulate, thinking the negative things. The effect of downregulating seems to be bigger than the effect of upregulating. And this is in contrast to what people thought, because people thought upregulating is easier than downregulating, whereas when I had them do it in the lab, it seems like people are better, more effective at decreasing love feelings than increasing love feelings. So this is interesting, where people may think something that may not actually be true. I also, while participants were doing this task, I recorded their brain waves. So this is called EEG, electroencephalography. You put this cap on someone's head and you plug those electrodes in. This is a very nice method because it is harmless, doesn't hurt, it's not dangerous in any way. But it shows you, it gives you a millisecond precision what the brain is doing. It doesn't tell you where in the brain the signal is coming from, but it is telling you when something is happening, and then we can also tell what cognitive process is happening, for example, attention or memory, things like that. And then this is what the data looks like that you get when you put a cap on someone. So I'll talk you through this. So there's two graphs here. One's the relationship group, one is the breakup group, but again, they are fairly similar. On the horizontal axis is milliseconds. So this is 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second, which was the duration of the picture. So the picture was on the screen for 1 second, and here we are looking at the average of the brain's response to the different pictures or the pictures in the different conditions, either view, positive reappraisal, or negative reappraisal. These black lines, the vertical axis is microvolt, and that's actual brain activation. Don't ask me why, but oftentimes positive is plotted downwards. So this is a late positive potential, and it is positive even though it goes down. That's just how these data are usually plotted. These black lines here are neutral pictures. These are pictures of strangers that are doing very mundane tasks, such as reading the newspaper or grocery shopping, and the brain doesn't really respond to these pictures. They are pretty boring. All the other colored lines are the beloved picture. So you can already see that the brain responds very differently to a picture of your beloved than a stranger, which also makes sense, right? But we are especially interested in the differences between just looking at your partner picture or thinking positively about your partner when you look at them, or thinking negatively about your partner when you look at them. And what I found was that you can see here that the blue line, which is thinking positive things, was more positive than the red line here, the view, just the control condition. And so this LPP, the late positive potential, was more positive, again, positive is down, was more positive when people were thinking positive stuff about their beloved than when they were just looking at them. And we know that this late positive potential measures attention, and specifically motivated attention, attention that we pay to something because it is emotional. So if you think positively about your beloved, you will then have more attention for your beloved. And you can see how that could be helpful in relationships, right? If you have more attention for your beloved, you may be less distracted by other people or other things you need to do. You can focus on your partner. I also found, although in a relationship only, that thinking negatively about your beloved decreases the late positive potential compared to the control condition. And so that means that if you think negatively about your beloved, you now pay less attention to them, which could be good if that person is, for example, an ex, right? Or someone you should not be in love with. Okay, so that was my very first study on love regulation. I was very excited because people have some beliefs that it's difficult, or maybe not even wanted to regulate your love feelings. But if I could have people do it in the lab, and it's not an on or off button, like they weren't like not in love anymore or very much in love, but they could tweak it a little bit. So they could be a little bit more or less in love depending on what they were thinking. I was a little bit concerned though that, thinking all those positive things about your beloved, that's just pleasant, right? Now you're thinking pleasant thoughts. And I thought, if you feel better, maybe you're also more in love, right? Maybe if life is going well, you are more in love. So I wanted to do a control study to test, is it just thinking positively that makes you more in love? So we did another study, and I had people look at neutral pictures. So again, the boring grocery shopping pictures, and people just thought about whatever they wanted to think about. But I also showed them very pleasant pictures that had nothing to do with their beloved. So cute puppies, nice flowers, extreme sports pictures. People also really like those pictures. And then I also had them look at spouse pictures. This was a married sample, while not thinking anything in particular, so just a view condition. And what we found was that infatuation and attachment and also marital satisfaction were increased. So people reported again how infatuated, how attached, how satisfied with your marriage are you right now, after just looking at spouse pictures. They didn't even have to think anything in particular. But that effect did not occur for pleasant pictures. So just looking at pleasant pictures, again, cute puppies, did not make people feel more in love, but looking at spouse pictures did make them feel more in love. So this showed that it's not just an effect of just thinking positive stuff. It needs to be positive things about your beloved that increases your love feelings for them. Okay, so then I wanted to do a study on sexual desire because, as many people also know, sexual desire decreases over time, often in long-term relationships, which can lead to problems, especially if then the sexual desire levels become mismatched, or if people start to worry, that if I'm not sexually attracted to my beloved anymore, does that mean we shouldn't be in a relationship anymore? So this can be a problem. So I wanted to see how can we make people feel more sexual desire for a long-term partner. So this was a very similar study. Again, we had pictures of the beloved, and in this case, I gave people specific regulation prompts to make it a little easier for them to think certain things rather than saying, think about something nice about your beloved. We made it very specific. So we thought, for example, we told them, for example, think of a time your partner made you laugh. And we had about 28 of these different prompts that made them think something good about their partner. And we were thinking maybe that, because that increases infatuation and attachment, so we were thinking maybe that will also increase sexual desire that we hadn't tested in previous studies. Another condition was reappraisal of sexual decline. So an example prompt was, it is normal for sexual desire to diminish over time. We thought if we can just tell people that this is normal and doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong with your relationship, maybe then they will be less stressed about it, and then ironically will start to feel more sexual desire. Sort of reassuring them, nothing's wrong. And then we had a condition which was sexual imagery. So an example prompt was, think of something naughty your partner could say during sex. So this made people fantasize basically about having sex with their partner. And then we had a view condition in which I just showed 3 asterisks and people could just think about whatever they wanted to think about. So there was a regulation prompt and they thought about sort of the prompt, and then they looked at the picture again, and then they rated how much sexual desire do you feel, how infatuated, how attached, and how satisfied with your relationship. So here are the results. So it turned out that sexual imagery increased both sexual desire and infatuation. So you can see that here. So this gray bar here is sexual imagery. The lightest bar is no regulation, so that was just the control condition. And you can see that that sexual desire and infatuation were higher after sexual imagery than the view condition. And then we also found that positive reappraisal of the partner, so thinking about the positive things of your partner, increased attachment compared to the control condition, which was, we found that in the previous study too. So it was nice to see that effect again. That reassuring people that it's okay that sexual desire decreases over time didn't really help anything. Didn't hurt either, but it didn't make people feel more infatuated or more sexual desire. So again, this was another study that showed that people can increase love feelings if you at least tell them in the lab how they could do it, give them some instructions on how to do this. But like I said, sometimes love feelings are also less intense, or sorry, more intense than you may want. For example, when someone breaks up with you. So I also wanted to test, can people down-regulate? Can they make themselves less in love after a heartbreak? And then does that make them feel better? Because that was my goal, right? So again, a very similar study, but different prompts. We did the negative reappraisal again. So one of the prompts was, what is something mean your ex said? Let's try to make them think about all those things that they didn't like about their ex-partner. We tried to distract them with other stuff. So we asked them, what would you do if you won the lottery? Or what's your favorite food? Hopefully things that didn't have anything to do with the ex-partner, but were still pleasant. And then we had them do love reappraisal. And this was, again, a sort of an education or acceptance. So it's okay to be in love with someone I'm no longer with. So sort of like, yes, you may still be in love with your ex-partner. That's okay, don't worry about it, it'll go away. In the hopes that that would sort of calm people down and make them actually feel less in love. Because that works with emotions. If you tell yourself, my pet died, I'm very upset, very sad about that, and that's okay, that actually makes you less sad. So I was hoping that would work the same with love. And then again, a view condition, which was the baseline, the control condition. Then they looked at the picture again and told us how in love they were and on how positive or negative they felt. So here are the results. Here are the love ratings. Here are valence, which is negative to positive, and love was 0 was I'm not in love at all, and 100 was I'm completely in love. And it turns out that negative reappraisal decreases how in love people are compared to no regulation, which is a replication of the very first study that I did. So I was happy to find that effect again. And I was like, well, now, then that's good, right? Now people are going to feel better. Except they didn't, because negative reappraisal also made people feel more negative than the control condition. And that was not my intent, right? I thought we're going to make them less in love with their ex-partner, and now they're going to feel better, which was not the case. So that was a bit of a bummer. However, distraction, so making them think of things that are completely unrelated to the beloved, did make them feel better. It didn't change how in love they were, but it made them feel better than no regulation at all. We also looked at brain waves, so the event-related potentials in this study. Again, this is milliseconds. This is brain activation with positive plotted downwards. The black line is pictures of the ex-partner, but no regulation, so a control condition. And then as you can see, all the other 3 strategies decreased how much attention people pay to their ex-partner, which can be, so that also means that then they paid less attention to the picture of their partner, which I thought may be very helpful in everyday life, because if you keep paying a lot of attention to the pictures of your ex-partner on Facebook, or maybe you see them in the street or at school or at work, it would be helpful, I think, that your attention is not so focused on them that you can maybe just ignore them and go on with what you were doing. But we were still a little bit annoyed by the finding that, yes, we can make people feel less in love with their ex-partner, but now they feel worse instead of better, which again was not what we wanted. So we did a follow-up study, again, to test certain strategies to make people feel less in love, but also then ask, does it make you feel better, and does it make people feel less upset about the breakup? So I thought, let's ask specifically about how upset they are about the breakup. Again, very similar study, negative reappraisal of the partner, We've seen that strategy several times. But now we also threw in positive reappraisal of the situation. So what is easier now that you're single? What's something your partner never wanted to do, and now you're single, and now you can eat all of that and do all of that and hang out with all of these people that they never wanted you to hang out with. And then again, a picture, and then asking them how they felt, how infatuated, how attached, how positive or negative, and how upset about the breakup. So here are the results. Negative reappraisal of the ex-partner decreased infatuation and attachment. So negative reappraisal, thinking negatively about the partner, makes you feel less infatuated than no regulation and makes you feel less attached than no regulation. Again, this was a replication of a previous finding, so that was nice. And then positive reappraisal of the situation made people feel better than negative reappraisal. So people felt more positive when they thought about all the things that all the good things about being single, being no longer with their ex-partner. Yeah, but negative reappraisal still made people feel bad, right? Unfortunately. So that was, we confirmed that result that yes, you can now feel less in love with your ex, but now you feel worse, unfortunately. Okay. And then upsetness about the breakup there was no effect there. So, to tie it all together, because there were a lot of studies, I realize. So, about love regulation, people have beliefs or preconceptions about that. Some people, or on average, people seem to think that either it's undesirable, you shouldn't regulate love feelings, it's a natural process, you should just let it happen, or maybe you should try to regulate your love feelings, but it's very difficult, if not impossible. I've also convinced you, I hope, that this is not true, right? So maybe it's good to try and regulate your love feelings if you do it in the right way, right? Because you don't want to upregulate love feelings for an ex-partner, for example, like that would not be helpful. But if you try to downregulate it for someone you shouldn't be in love with or do not want to be in love with, and upregulate your love feelings for someone that you should or want to be in love with. And it's definitely possible. People can up and downregulate love feelings when I ask them to do that in the lab. So to summarize, looking at pictures of the beloved increases infatuation and attachment. So just looking at pictures, very easy strategy. And then if you think about positive things about your beloved or the relationship or the future, that will then increase attachment to your partner or to the beloved, and also motivated attention, so how much attention you pay to that person. And sexual imagery increases sexual desire and infatuation, which can also be very helpful in long-term relationships. So any of these strategies could stabilize long-term relationships. People can also downregulate love feelings. So negative reappraisal of the beloved, thinking negatively about them, decreases infatuation, attachment, and attention to a beloved, but it also makes people feel worse. However, distraction and positive reappraisal of the situation make people feel better, more positive. And this could help, especially during heartbreak. Another, I think, important aspect of this line of work is, so I was looking for cognitive or behavioral strategies. So is there something that someone can think or do to change how in love they are? I'm not talking here about medication, right? I'm not talking about taking a love pill that makes you more or less in love. We've been trying to develop one since forever, I think. And we're trying to have certain foods, chocolate, oysters, that supposedly do something to love feelings. I'm not sure that we'll ever get there. For a variety of reasons, among other things, how does a pill know which person they are supposed to target, right? I take a pill to make me feel more in love with who? The first person I see after taking the pill, right? But anyway, even I think we're also nowhere near, we don't have the knowledge yet, if ever, that we could use to develop such a pill. But who knows, maybe I'm wrong. I'm also not talking about couples therapy, because that's, of course, a widely used strategy. The problem is, you need to tell your partner, I'm less in love with you than I wish I were. Can we go to couples therapy? No, that's a hard message, and maybe they don't want to. And then what are you going to do? So the advantage of all these strategies is that you can do these by yourself. The other person doesn't need to know that you're doing this, doesn't need to know there's a problem. No one can force you to do this. No one spikes your drink with a love pill, right? No one can force you to think these things, so it's totally up to you. So you can do them all by yourself, no doctor, no therapist needed, and the other person, the beloved, doesn't need to know you're doing this. So I think those are all advantages to all of these strategies. So I hope I've convinced you today that research on love is important, and that people can regulate their love feelings in surprisingly simple ways. And we can make love more intense if we want to. We can make it slightly less intense. So it's something that you could maybe even try out if you wanted to. I also wanted to give you a taste of what I would like to study or am studying. Something completely different. So a lot of people ask me when they hear I do research on love, so what are butterflies in the stomach? And I was like, well, that's a great question. Let me look in the literature, and there's no research on that. And so I was like, well, that's interesting. So I did some more digging, and then I found some work that studies what happens in the gut with emotions. And there was some research that showed that the intestines contract more strongly the more emotionally intense the feeling is that you have. Which makes sense because we will say, I have a knot in my stomach, or my stomach churned, or, and I think, this is my hypothesis, that butterflies and stomach are the same thing. We just have a different name for it when we think our stomach is making us feel that way because of a beloved, as opposed to we are sitting in the waiting room of the dentist, right? But I think it's the same thing that happens in your intestines. I have tried to, because I have the equipment to measure brain waves. Theoretically, you can use the same equipment to measure stomach waves. So I tried to do that in 2 studies, but that's not my expertise. And those 2 studies, they were just null findings, so I couldn't find any effect that I could make sense of. But it could very well be that I just didn't do it right, because that's not my field of expertise. So I'm still looking for people whose expertise it is that can maybe help me try to figure out, is it really the intestines contracting more strongly, and is that what people feel is butterflies in the stomach? The other thing I'm currently doing, we're having our first participant on Friday. People that are in love seem addicted to their beloved. And a lot has been written about the similarities between romantic love and addiction. And that is very appealing, quite convincing, but there's not a lot of research that actually directly compares the two. And so what we want to do in our lab is we want to compare how is romantic love similar and different from addiction. We're studying vaping addiction, just because a lot of people are vaping now, but we could have studied cocaine addiction. I'm not sure that vaping is special. It's just we think it will be easier to recruit participants who vape than participants who do cocaine, basically. But we're going to test participants who are both in love and vape and show them pictures of their beloved and of people vaping, and then see if their brain responds the same or different in terms of how much attention people pay to these pictures. And then also we're going to measure their craving. So how much do you want to be with your beloved right now? How much do you want to smoke a vape right now? And see the similarities and differences between craving for a beloved and a vape. So that's something that we're currently working on, and I'm very excited to see what the results will be. So a big thanks to my students and collaborators, my funders, and to you for listening to me talk. I have a website, so if you just Google NEMLab, you will find this website. You can find my articles, for example. I'm also on Facebook, or the lab is on Facebook, and then of course I have an email address, so if you have any questions or comments, feel free to contact me. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to take questions.